your success is not necessarily welcomed elsewhere. So if every African country added value to raw materials and they became 3, 5, 7, 10 times more expensive, that fundamentally damages the economic balance in the countries that are currently getting it for next to nothing. So everything here would become 3 or 4 times more expensive. It would be an unsustainable economic model. They would have to change things dramatically. It would be incredibly expensive. People would become unemployed. So you've got to kind of say, well, what do they do to mitigate that?
Thank you so much for making the time once again for the new episode of African Diaspora Dialogue. It's going to be a very interesting conversation because I'm talking to a man who has traveled across continents, who has been in leadership positions, who has gone through the conflict. Africa has literally happened to this man. Like, he's been through it all, but he's been resilient regardless of what he's been through. He is working towards the growth of the continent. In his words, he has learned, he has earned, and now he wants to give back. Why is it so much important that he's doing what he's doing? Let's talk.
Oh, thank you, Nana.
Hello.
A big responsibility.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to meet you, Rushdi. How has it been like? Let me start with this. What's your relationship with Africa? Let's start from there.
Well, I'm an African. I mean, first and foremost, my father is Sudanese. I consider myself to be Sudanese.
Right.
My mother is actually British.
Okay.
I was born and spent the first 12 years of my life in the Sudan. So
Right.
I was totally kind of raised in the Sudanese environment. And then my father, who was working in housing in Sudan, he was transferred to the United Nations in Ethiopia, and as a consequence, I found myself there for a few years.
Okay.
And then had to leave as evacuation because of the this was during the time of Mengistu and
Right.
the early days of what was then became the sort of what was called the Red Terror, which was a terrible time, really. Some 200,000, very difficult to know, but at least 200,000, maybe double that, were killed in that time, including many of my friends who were very young. So this was a very kind of difficult phase for Ethiopia at that time, and we were forced to leave the country. I was very, very disappointed. That's a country I loved very much and still do. So I continued my education in the UK, and I worked there for 26 odd years, but I always wanted to go back.
Right.
I always wanted to go back to Sudan. And there was a time in the early 2000s when the situation there seemed to be easing up because we had a sort of a fundamentalist government had taken control in 1989. But a few years later, there was a certain amount of prosperity. Oil had been discovered, and there seemed to be an opening up. And I wanted to go back. I mean, I wanted to go back, make a difference. And I had very good memories of my childhood in the Sudan. By this time, I was married and I had kids. And I wanted them to experience something of the childhood that I experienced. And so I found a way to go back, originally to set up a dive resort. And I thought that would take maybe 6 months. I had partners who were friends from when I was a kid there, some of who remained or went back sooner than I did. And what I hoped would take 6 months took nearly 9 years. So obviously in that period we abandoned that. I abandoned that. I couldn't continue waiting for that project to come about. So I started to work as a management consultant using the skills that I had gained in the UK with the companies there. And there was a big need for, strategic planning, corporate organizing and stuff like that. So I started to work in that sector, got involved in the manufacturing sector, dairy processing, and it was a company that actually introduced the Tetra Pak packaging into Sudan at that time.
Okay.
And I'm very pleased to say we're able to grow that business significantly. And but at the same time, I was also getting involved in other sectors. I got asked to represent some British companies in the oil and gas sector, which was very interesting. And so I stepped back from my manufacturing work and started to do that and do a lot of work for myself. And I basically settled there. So that was in 2000, thereabouts.
Okay.
And I was there working until driven out by the war in April 2023.
Again.
So, and I found myself in London. I was actually visiting. I came here the day before the war started. So
Did you come with your family or?
no, at this point, my family were all here.
Okay.
So there was none of that difficulty, I'm pleased to say. My kids are all here in London. They went to complete their education here. And so my older kids are working here now.
Right.
So I came here to visit my mother, actually, on a 10-day trip. So I had a bag with the clothing for 10 days,
Right.
and then discovered that I wasn't going back.
Oh my God. So how long have you been here since?
Well, I stayed here for a few months, so from April, and then I went to Cairo to catch up with my old business partner, people most of whom were forced to leave the country found themselves in Egypt, being the nearest obvious sort of crossing point. Others got displaced into South Sudan and Ethiopia and Uganda and so on, the neighboring countries, and Chad. And so I spent a little while there, and then needed to decide to kind of pick up and move on, as it were, because everybody was hoping, obviously, after 3 months or 6 months, this thing was going to stop, and it became very clear that it was just escalating and getting worse. So I went to Dubai, and I stayed there for 7 months, and it's a place I've been working in for 20 years, but that didn't suit me at all. I did not like that one bit. So I decided to come back to London. And a friend of mine who I was helping on a just a social event, he wanted to do a cultural festival in Kenya, asked me if I'd come and join him there and just help him with this project. So I thought I would love to do that. I used to work in Kenya because it was the headquarters of Tetra Pak for Africa, North Africa and North and East Africa. And I went and stayed in Nairobi, which I loved.
Okay.
I loved very much. So I was there for many months doing this work and was very keen to continue there.
Wow.
But anyway, that project reached a natural end. I went to Cairo again and then came back to London. And one of the previous jobs that I was working with asked me to go back to do a consultancy as a humanitarian coordinator for a consortium of banks in Sudan doing multi-purpose cash assistance, which is supporting through international organizations and local NGOs for supporting displaced communities in Sudan. That's
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm actually smiling and thinking through, for someone who had to experience what you experienced as a child, which led you to moving from Sudan, you don't seem to say no when there is an opportunity to go back to Africa to work. Were you not traumatized by what happened? Why were you so keen into going back to Africa to work anyways? You could have chosen anywhere. Why did you choose? You've mentioned Ethiopia, you've mentioned Egypt, you've mentioned Kenya, and these are all African countries. Why did you say yes to that opportunity to go back when you've been through so much?
With all its problems, you know, it's in the broader sense, and I've worked a lot particularly in East Africa.
Okay.
I can't think of a better place to be, right? Despite all the problems, all the difficulties, the potential, the physical environment is fantastic. So, and as an African, I really want to invest my time, and any value that I can give to help raise that continent, you know. And like many people, I feel I have some things I can offer. The little that I can, I would like it to be in Africa rather than anywhere else. And it's a place that makes me happy.
Happy? How?
It's kind of I suppose it's like a love affair with a woman that's a little bit difficult, but
Okay.
you're kind of you're kind of obsessed with her. She's beautiful, she's alluring, she's sexy. But is not as cooperative as you would like her to
Right,
be,
okay.
has her moods, has her moments, can lash out. But nevertheless, there she is, and she is the person you want. So you have to kind of work around these
Right.
difficulties. And of course, I consider myself an extremely lucky person. I mean, in the sense that, like many millions of people, was driven out of my home. I got looted. Or everything of value I had was physical, was destroyed. But I have my life, and I'm one of the privileged people who was able to go somewhere else and actually manage.
Yeah.
There are many people who are displaced in dire circumstances, facing famine and all sorts of catastrophes. So I also would like to go and make some difference there. And actually, with my current work, I hope we're going to be doing that.
That's interesting. I mean, I can attest to the fact that Africa has a lot of mood swings. Because one week it's all rosy, and then the next week they are not smiling at all. Or you can have a particular region or country doing well, and then the other one is like, just leave me alone. I just want to be on my own. So that I agree 100%. But I just want to know, like for someone, again, going back to my initial question, who has been through all these, like you've experienced the war, and I don't think it's anything anybody at all should go through. Like, what's the point of it? But then you came back and you decided to go back again to work. Was there anything in particular that convinced you, that made you think, if I have a contribution, it has to be back home? Was it because of what you experienced that you don't want other people to experience the same thing? Or you think you have that great skill that will contribute to the potential or increasing the potential that Africa has? What is it exactly that made you wanted to go back?
I think, apart from the love of that world and being with your own people, as it were, there's so much to be done, right? There's so much to be done there. And if a tenth of what could be done is done, it would be transformative.
Right.
It would really change things. And one of the things that I see, and I'm sure you see, and a lot of people see, is it's all sort of fractured. There's not much cooperation, there's not much communication. There are fantastically rich people doing very well who are in a sense almost ignoring, dare I say it, the millions below them, and it's a kind of I'm okay and I'm not too concerned about the others. And I think that has been taken advantage of by the international community. And sometimes people want to blame those people, but I think we have to look at ourselves first, and we have to look at why we're presenting opportunities for people to interfere and intervene. And it is, in a sense, taking advantage of weakness. If there was unity, you would be strong. You may not be financially strong, you may not be politically strong, you may not be militarily strong, but you are strong. And that strength prevents division, creating the opportunities for others to take advantage. And I think I would like to be a person who contributes to creating some kind of unity. And that could be just a unity of thinking, a unity of making decisions that are coherent in the best interests of the country and the people of that country. And when you ask people what they want, they're not different from anywhere in the world. They're usually quite simple things. I want a sense of a future. I want a sense of a future for my kids. I would like them to get a decent education. I would like to be healthcare, and I would like the opportunity to work. And they're easily said and they're not so easily delivered, but they're not also that complicated. And if we focused on those things, I think we would do very well in a unified way.
I think your life, your career life and personal life truly emulates that very well. You symbolize what you preach. You are not just talking, but you are walking the talk. You are doing what you want or you expect other people to do, which is very exceptional and a very great character to have. But then my question is, you were in Sudan before, and then you came to the UK, and then you had to go back to Sudan to work. The Sudan before and the Sudan now, What is the difference? And why do you think it's safe working in Sudan now? Not thinking what happened before could happen again. Why is it safe now?
It's definitely not safe now, unfortunately. Okay. I mean, when I first left as a child, obviously I had no choice. I was traveling with parents. When I made the choice to come back, and I was doing very well here in the UK, you know, some people were very surprised by the decision for me to move back. And honestly, I think it was also a personal one, which is like everything is very neat in my life, and you know, you'd go to dinner parties. And what would people talk about? They would talk about the value of their property and the appreciating value of their property and kind of redecorating the kitchen or the living room. Yeah. And I remember saying to my wife, you know, is this it? And then I wait to get a heart attack or cancer or whatever. You know, I mean, this just seems like an absurd way to live a life. You know, so maybe an early midlife crisis, I don't know. But I've never regretted the decision to go back to Sudan. So I went back to Sudan as an adult with a lot of skills and tried to do something that the system made difficult. So when I was there in the 70s, there was some sort of fledgling tourism and diving industry, and that didn't last very long. And we have some of the best diving in the world, easily in the top 10.
Okay, now I need to visit Sudan.
Yes, well, we hope one day. So when living there, and then now this war, which is still raging, and has been a disaster for the country. I mean, it is still very much, and now we're 32 months into this war. I do hope to be able to go back to Sudan. In parts of it is approachable, but the country is still very much fractured. And in a sense, a lot of the social fabric has been destroyed. People have taken positions. Some of them have been cultural, ethnic. Some of these positions have been forced on them by where they find themselves in terms of circumstance. So it's going to be a while before things settle. But what I would like to do in the meantime is to try and be as helpful as possible to try and bring a resolution to that war in any way possible, to contribute to what hopefully post-war will be a rebuilding of the country.
Yeah. For someone who is very skillful in many or different ways, and you are not holding back your skill, you are pumping it into the same country. I'm still hitting on this Sudan thing because it's very easy for anyone not to go back. I can't sit here and say what you did was a difficult or an easy choice because I haven't experienced that before, thank God. But I don't know what would have been my options or what I would have chosen to do if I would have ever wanted to go back. If someone does something to me, it's very easy to forgive, but it's not easy to forget. And sometimes you see things that remind you of the past. What do you think that Sudan needs now at this point so that the new generation wouldn't have to go through what's the old, not old like too old with age, but what the early generation went through? Because we don't want things to remain the same. If there is any opportunity for development, if there is any opportunity to turn things around for the good, why not? We will want to do it. So that it doesn't become like a recycle, you know, there is war, there is peace, there is stability, and then everything just goes and we build again. Do you get it? Like,
yes.
We are always at the starter's gates. There is no moving forward. And generation comes and generation goes. So this generation now that we have, what do you think the country of Sudan needs now that the new generation wouldn't have to, have to rebuild at a point? It doesn't really help with development. What do we need at this particular point in time?
For me, and I don't think this is just about Sudan. I mean, in the work that I've done in the region, whether it's Sudan or Uganda or Tanzania or Chad or Ethiopia, it's always the same thing, which is a sense of the future. Somebody needs to actually create a vision for the future that young people can subscribe to. And then you need to actually start building the steps so that those very people can see that future is on its way. And I think we have this stop-start that you're talking about. And what people want is a future. So people don't leave their country because of any other thing than they don't perceive that there is a future for them there, or they can't find a job. and then the lure of crossing a sea to go somewhere else, whether it is illegally or legally, becomes more attractive. And what you have to do is you have to make a sense of a future being in your own home country.
Right.
So I think that's the first thing. So in order to have a sense of a future, somebody has to create some kind of vision that is realistic. And that to me has always been a worry. And share and inspire people with a vision about what a future can be. I'll give you a very simple example. Ever since I was a child, right, so let's say for the last 50 years, Sudan has been beating a drum that's saying we could be the breadbasket of the Middle East and one of the biggest food producers on earth. And I've heard that story all my life, right? And this day now, and it's certainly now, and I'm talking before the war, we were a net importer of food, somewhere to the tune of 270,000 tons of foodstuffs. And we have post-harvest losses, so that are greater than that. So actually, forget being the breadbasket of the world. We could easily feed ourselves if we were just managing our affairs properly. And those things are not complicated things, but they are things that require a certain amount of discipline and continuity. My experience has been plans are never adhered to. Sound bites are where the rhetoric is, and the hard work gets avoided because the people who are making those decisions are more concerned about their short-term interests. You know what I mean? So we have. I mean, I'll give you an example. I'm from personal experience. You'll get a number of things happen. So a minister comes into a position, and it doesn't really matter what it is. A minister comes into a position, and then says, "What am I going to do?" Right? Which already I think is a problem, because what would be nice is for that minister to come into the position and be told that there are certain things that he or she is on a continuum that have been determined years ago, and this is your role to move it from this point to the next point, you know, like a relay race. So you're going to carry the baton of this project. Now, if you've got some new ideas, some good ideas, you want to do some other things, by all means. But what you don't do is you throw out this program for some new nonsense that you've brought up in your head. And it may be good stuff, right? So let's not be too disparaging. I mean, maybe that person has good ideas and they can be integrated or incorporated or added, but don't lose sight of the long-term plan, because the long-term plan is where the hard work is and the consistent work. You know, it's like TV generation. I remember when I was a kid, you used to have Miami Vice, right? And it's kind of ludicrous because you had these two guys, you know, Crockett and Tubbs or whatever his name was, and they're running around in fancy clothes and Lamborghinis, and they're police officers, right? And nobody in their dreams is going to be, you know, dressed or behaving like that. But what it kind of creates, it sort of creates to me an aspiration for people to go from zero to everything without the hard work that's required in the middle, right? And the hard work is boring, right? It's boring, it's tedious. And people say, look at that person, the millionaire, you know. Now the millionaire, unless he inherited or she inherited it, probably worked very hard and very long for that money. And I think we also have this danger of the kind of an internet culture that says, you know, I want to be an influencer. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly legitimate thing to be. But is it I want to be an influencer because I want the fame and the glory without the effort? And actually being an influencer, and anybody working, you know, in media knows it's a lot of hard work. It is a lot of hard work. But what is the secret of that hard work? It's the consistency.
That's right.
Right? And I think that's where we, in a lot of the African countries, and I'm talking about personal experiences, there is never a dedication to the consistency. And if you're not consistent, you will never really get anywhere unless it's kind of by some luck. You've really got to put in the work in a consistent, stable, steady way. look at the Agenda 2063, which is the Africa Plan. You know that,
Yeah.
Now, that is a wonderful document.
It's very good.
Right? It's a wonderful document. And it talks about all these things, what needs to be done. It's been studied. We're not short of clever people on this continent. And I was just looking at that the other day, and one of the problems is, out of the 54 countries, 33 of them are reporting, right? It is also voluntary reporting, and there is inconsistencies in the quality of the information that they're reporting on. So there's already a kind of a problem. You get drift, and then you say, well, how do you create compulsion, right? Because in a way, sometimes maybe that's what's needed. And I was thinking, well, how do the European Union, European countries do? Now, they have a lower kind of legal framework that affects some of those things, that creates the compulsion kind of internally. And those are the kind of things I think we need to build in, where people have a requirement to deliver certain things in their tenure, right, above and beyond whatever else they want to be doing.
Right.
And I don't see that very often. I go to ministers' offices, and the thing that I see is there's 2 or 3 TVs in the office. There's a lot of nice sofas.
What for?
There's a lot of space. And there's never any books. There's never any files. There's never, I'm thinking, what are these people doing?
Maybe they are going digital. Like everything is on the computer.
You think so? Well, you're being very generous.
Maybe. Wow.
So I think that's it. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a long time ago, right? In this, I think it was the mid-70s or so on. India as a country, they discovered that they were a net importer of milk and milk products. And they realized that they needed to kind of become self-sufficient and grow that area. And they started a project called Operation Flood, 25-year program, right? So that's the first thing. I mean, if you speak to some African countries about a 25-year program, you're already 22, 23 years beyond, anything that they want to contemplate. So I think that's a very important thing. And then they had a plan, and they consistently followed that plan. And at the end of this process, they ended up being one of the biggest milk producers on the planet, right? And actually became net exporters and certainly self-sufficient in comfort. And that's using their resources, buffalo milk and whatever. Now, when I was in Sudan, I was working in the dairy processing business, and at some point there was a sort of crisis. And like I said, Sudan has one of the largest livestock herds on the continent, and certainly in the world, maybe in the top 10. Yet milk production, beef production, all these things, they leave as livestock, literally live onto boats going to the Gulf or going to Egypt, walked to the ship or walked across the border. So you're not getting the value of the thing, but also the quality of these things is very low. And when we were looking at it, for a cow, I mean, and I'm talking in economic terms, for a cow to be considered a cow, it needs to produce, I think, something like 12 liters of milk a day.
Okay.
Right? So if it produces less than that, I mean, it's in economic terms, it's not a dairy cow at all.
Okay.
Because they consume a lot of water, and there's a lot of inputs to make that successful. So you have millions of cows, and a lot of that is a cultural thing about, the numbers is more important than the quality, and that's fine because, they're your cows at the end of the day. But if you want to build an industry, then you have to start saying, okay, well, how are we going to improve the yields? And you need to accommodate the cultural norms and the sensitivities of the people if there is a need. So you've got to kind of start fixing some of the problems. The numbers isn't enough, quality over quantity at any time. Yeah. And like I say, 50 years been waiting to be the breadbasket of the Middle East, and you can't even feed yourself, and it's tragic.
We've not gone very far.
Yeah, but we could, and we still can.
So
nothing has changed.
Do you think, I wouldn't want to call it a problem, but do you think we are finding it difficult to identify our strength, not just for Sudan, but as a continent? Because we all know the potential this continent has. The things we have, the things we are able to bring forth, it's amazing. But for some way, somehow, just as you said, like we are unable to do the value addition to get the full benefit of what we produce. We enjoy pushing the raw materials outside, and then the value is added. And we are so happy to import them back. But then if we do all these processes home, we are able to enjoy the fruit of our labor and then even export some. Do you think we are failing to identify our strength? Or just as you said, we have like leaders who are very short-term thinkers. Do we have to build a model? Are we even receptive for that change to happen? What is it? Like, what is it exactly? Because you have had business, you've done businesses in Africa, and then I'm sure you've gone through some of these challenges. What is it?
I mean, I think there is a very important issue. One of them is like, if you there's a colonial legacy that has made us become producers of raw materials for other people.
Okay.
Right, and that's not an accident. And let's, I mean, I use the West in a very loose way here. So let's say Western countries who are benefiting from the raw materials because what they want is the cheapest product possible. They add the value and they benefit from that, and then they sell that to their own people and they sell it back to us. It's the old business about, you know, you're buying, if you're in Ghana, it's a good example, is you're buying chocolate.
Of course.
You know, you've sent it out at a 20th of that value and you're buying it back. It's gone to Europe or wherever, and you're buying it back.
And, you know, sorry to interject, but then, you know, like back home, we have this thing of appreciating the imported goods over the locally made ones. It doesn't make sense because, using the chocolate as an example, most of these cocos move from this particular country. And then it goes to the foreign land, it goes through all the processes, and then it comes back home. But the ones that we add value, we don't like it.
Well, and that's a colonial mindset. I mean, I think that's that's also a colonial hangover. I mean, in business that happens all the time. I'll give you an example without naming names, right? We used to work in geographic information systems, building data sets. So think of location-based services like Google Maps, right? So a telecom company asked us, we produce these data sets for all sorts of purposes. And they contacted us and they said, we would like to buy this data set so that we can do location-based, you know, where's the nearest pizza parlor and all that. And we have that information. So we went, we had the discussion, and these are kind of complicated bits of data. Anyway, so let's say this discussion was around €1 million for this project. And we at the time are a local company, right? And the local telecom company is saying to us, what do you mean it's €1 million? That's way too expensive. That's nonsense. And your local company and blah, 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 blah. And we said, well, you know, it's a kind of take it or leave it deal. This isn't, you know, we're not bartering over tomatoes here. It's a high piece of technology. A lot of investment has gone into it, and this is what it costs. Right? Anyway, so they didn't do the business with us, and we thought, okay, well, there's not much we can do about that. I kid you not, right? 3 or 4 days later, local company, right? International company, Ericsson, right? Who working there? They contacted us, and we've done work with them on data sets for all sorts of other things. And they said, do you have a data set of this city that we can take off you? And we said, yes. Well, what do you want it for? And they said, well, we want to pass it on. The telecom company has asked us whether we can supply this technology, right? So myself and my colleagues said, okay, well, yes, we do. And, well, how much is it? And we said, well, it's 1.5 million. And so we thought, well, we'll take advantage of this situation. And anyway, after a bit of toing and froing, we agreed and we passed it on to them. They passed it on to the telecom company for twice that.
I think I
right?
saw that coming.
So, I mean, and that is because the telecom company felt that the Europeans, by dint of being Europeans, had more credibility and ended up paying 3 times for the same
thing.
Right? So in many ways, with that kind of mindset, we're our own worst enemies. I mean, that's the kind of long and short. And actually, you know, this has become a very cynical exercise, even in the oil and gas sector. Sometimes when you're working with some countries, it was in our interest to pay a European or an American, and by that I mean a white person, to go and do the presenting for the work for us, because the response would be different, more positive. Now, those are problems that we have that we need to overcome, that kind of colonial mindset and that sense of our own worth. So I think that's a different one. The coming back to the question about there are structural things that have made it very easy for us to export raw materials and quite difficult and complicated to do, you know, value added. And that's no accident, because if you think about it, you're always balancing other people's. Your success is not necessarily welcomed elsewhere. So if every African country added value to raw materials and they became 3, 5, 7, 10 times more expensive, that fundamentally damages the economic balance in the countries that are currently getting it for next to nothing. So everything here would become 3 or 4 times more expensive. It would be an unsustainable economic model. They would have to change things dramatically. It would be incredibly expensive. People would become unemployed. So you've got to kind of say, well, what do they do to mitigate that? Well, they interfere with your ability to do that, right? So, I mean, that's the kind of political context that you're working in. So in a sense, value added is not as straightforward as, oh, they're just sitting there not doing it. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why they're making it not right. So, I mean, that's the kind of political context that you're working in. So, in a sense, value added is not as straightforward as, oh, they're just sitting there not doing it. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why they're making it not easy for you, or just take the money, which easy for the people who could make those decisions to, which is why, you know, you find leaders in Africa who are fantastically rich and been there way past their sell-by date. And I would argue they're there because other people find it convenient for them to be the blockers of the things that would be awkward for them. And it is very cheap to pay somebody 50 or 100 or 200 million than to face the consequences of something that you're buying for peanuts being 20 or 30 times that is system critical to you. So there's that. Now, that's the reality we're in. If you understand the reality, you need to then say, okay, what are we going to do about it? And you have to do those baby steps. And I think consistency, saying we have a plan, let's do it, let's work on it, and coming back to this Operation Flood thing, myself and some people who are in that manufacturing sector were trying to do that in our country. Right, which was to speak to the powers that be and say, you know, we have this livestock, we have the potential, we're importing milk powder in a country where we should be producing vast quantities of it, right? And so that benefit is going somewhere else. And we accept that, you know, we haven't got it now, but if we made a plan and we introduced good practices, we helped local farmers build up their yields, understand the best way to do that, get rid of weird structural things like VAT on animal feed, then you would have something where you would grow. And but that didn't work, because actually it was just easier for that person to say, well, you know, actually for me, I can get income. You're bringing in this stuff. If I just add more tax to the import, you know, that's me solved my problem, rather than the country is trying to get to another place.
So we are being selfish, and that is not just for the leaders, but in people who are in positions where they could make things different as well. you have had the opportunity to work in the Western world and in Africa. You are the best person to tell us the difference between these models and which one works. For businesses in Africa, what do you think is the biggest gap? Why are we... It's very easy for a business or an SME in Africa to fold after a few years. What is hindering us from growing? What is hindering the businesses from outliving the owners and then the founders of it? What is the gap? Because we have a lot of businesses in the Western world that started in the... I can't even date back. 100 years ago, 50 years ago,
yes.
120 years ago. But it is very easy for a business in Africa to... It dies with the owners. And sometimes even before the owners, these businesses die. What do you think is the biggest gap? What are we doing so wrongly that is affecting our businesses?
I mean, I think it's the climate. There isn't an enabling framework.
Yeah.
So if you're a young person, and I'll give you because myself and some friends we're looking at how do you kind of resolve some of these problems. So I'll give you an example. You're a young person, you're an entrepreneur, and you might be doing something very simple like, I'm going to open a shop that sells mobile, accessories,
right.
Mobile phone accessories. It's a big business, there's lots of little shops selling case covers and cables and what have you. And you open this little store and you start using it, and then suddenly you run into the VAT people saying you owe us money, and if you don't, we'll shut you down. And then fear of these legislative framework, huge hurdles to get over. They don't make it easy. Let's put it that way. It's not easy. It's easier to be out of the system than in the system.
Right.
Right. And as soon as you're out of the system and you're earning the money on an informal market, and that's the case in most African countries, is the informal market is far greater than the formal market. But why is that? That's because the formal market is so structured that it makes it very difficult for you to succeed and pay taxes and fulfill the requirements. They're too complicated, they're too demanding, and they're too soon. And there's a fear of that, right? There's a fear of getting caught up in the system, and then suddenly, all I wanted to do was, start a shop and make a bit of money, and now I'm getting fined, and people are coming, and I'm being threatened, and all the rest of it. So one of the things that we were trying to do is said, wouldn't it be good if we set up an organization, right, that encouraged small businesses to come? We'll give you some space. And what we will handle is we will handle the accounting, we will handle the dealing with the legal bodies, and we will handle your ability to manage your affairs.
Right.
Right? And you do the creative thing that it is you wanted to do. Right? And we'll take that anxiety away from you. And we will do that in a kind of managed, friendly, easy way. And I was actually doing this with somebody who was very willing to do it using his existing network. He's a big businessman. He's got hundreds of accountants, plenty of lawyers. They're doing this for their own thing. And adding another 20 small businesses that they can manage within the time they've got would be very easy. And using their leverage with the tax authorities and so on to make this simple, then people can grow. So, but in a broader sense, there needs to be this joined-up thinking that says, okay, we have a lot of entrepreneurial people. Let's make it very easy for entrepreneurs. Let's make the legislative hurdles simple. Because the alternative is they will do it in a different way and you'll get nothing from it.
Of course. Of course.
But nobody is doing that joined-up thinking. And I'm not quite sure why, but it needs to be done, and it can be done.
Yeah. In as much as I think this conversation has to go on, we are not doing very well with time. And it's a shame because there is a lot to talk about. And I think our conversation has been rebuilding your own life, going through the war time of Sudan, your business, your skills, contributing to Africa and everything. It's been like a little bit and pieces of every part of your life. And I feel like there is still much to explore. But just as I said earlier, Time is not our friend, right? Time is not our best ally right now, which is a shame. But just to end it all, you are doing so much. Not like you've done, because you are not done. You are still working. You are doing so much for Sudan. You are doing so much for Africa. What is that one thing that gives you hope for the future of Sudan and Africa at large? And then we will just end there.
We have incredibly talented young people.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the number one. And most of them just need an opportunity, right? So if we give them the opportunity, they will fly. And I think that's the one thing that we've got. You know, by 2050, African young people are going to be 42% of the youth of this planet. And if we give them a chance now, you know, the future is assured. And it needs to be now, you know, because I remember when I was a young person and I was getting late on something, somebody gave me a very important lesson, and I was coming to a meeting and I was a bit late, 2 or 3 minutes. And then I was like, oh, I thought I was on time. And he said to me, Rush, on time is too late. So we don't want to wait until things are right. You've got to actually start now. And if we make that investment in young people and give them the opportunities, they will take care of the rest. And I think if you ask any young person, they'll be perfectly happy with that.
Wow. What a way to sum up our conversation. This is so profound, and I think it's something I'm going to carry out for myself. You being on time is actually late. And this is the position where Africa needs to be. Because I think one thing we do is always looking out for the future. But the future is now. And just as you heard Rush say, Africa has so much potential that we can't just sit and wait for things to happen. We need to make them happen. This conversation means so much to me, and I'm sure it means so much to you as well. I have learnt a lot, and I know you have learnt a lot, but it has to continue some way, somehow. I don't know how we are going to make that happen, but there is still so much to talk about. But thank you. Thank you so much for making the time for today's episode. Please do subscribe to the channel, like, share. This knowledge cannot just live with us. We need to pass it on so people will know that they need to contribute to the growth of Africa. Thank you so much for making the time. I am glad to be your host. My name is Nana Ejewa. We were with Rushdi. Thank you so much. See you next time. Have a nice day. Bye. Thank you so much.